3, 2. All right, it's time to talk with our featured guest, Dr. Nathan Coughlin. Nathan, how's it going, man?
I'm doing fantastic. Just had a crazy busy day. And like we were talking before this started, busy is good. So life is good. I cannot complain.
Yeah, man, that's nice. That's really, really nice. Before we kind of like get into it and everything, tell us a little bit about
Yeah.
your past, your present. How'd you get to where you are today?
Oh my gosh. Okay. I'll give you this well, I think it's interesting version of how I came to this spot here. So my story
Mhm.
is slightly different. I grew up in Canada. So I'm Canadian born and raised. Um, my story is different though, because I was studying for the DAT back in the day, a long time ago.
Mhm.
And I ended up taking the test, and the Canadian DAT, if there's dentists listening, know that it's slightly different than the American DAT. So what it is in the Canadian version, you have this piece of soap, like maybe 6 inches big by maybe like a half inch around. And you have to carve out these little portions, like a square or triangle or something very specific into the soap. And I go to the test, and of course, you're preparing for like, so long for this test. Like everything like rides on this test. And so I'm going, and I do the thing, I do the carving, come out, I'm like, cool, that went amazing. Everything's like spot on, boom, I nailed it. And then after each section, you go and you talk to your friends, because you have a section, you do it, you talk to your friends, and then you go to the next section, and so on and so forth. So we get out, and they're like, oh yeah, that square was tough because it was like, 16 millimeters by 16 by 16. I was like, no, it wasn't. Like, it was like 20 by 20 by 20. And they're like, no, man, you're wrong. And I know, like, of course, everybody's saying the same thing. So I'm like, oh man, like I messed up. So then I knew it. Like as soon as I got like talked to everybody, I'm like, man, I messed up. And the Canadian schools are so competitive, like so competitive. So I had good GPA, but I knew because I messed up on that one part on the DAT, like I was screwed. And
Mhm.
so do the whole test, get the results back. Everything's good, of course, except for the soap carving. So in Canada, you can't retake the test. Like in the States, you can retake it all the time. In Canada, it was like 6 months before I could retake it. So I retook it. Everything went well. But by that time, it's like March. And so it's late in the game. Like people are getting into dental school in like, August, like July, August, September. So I'm in March.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my gosh, freaking out. So I applied to the Canadian school. And so like, yeah, everything's good, but we won't accept your second grade until next year. So I was like, oh man, that was like, I can't wait another year. So I applied to Boston and LA. I was at USC, actually in LA, got into USC and BU. And I was just like, all right, I got to go somewhere. Like, I don't want to be in the cold anymore. Although Boston, I'm sure, is a cool city. I
Yeah.
was like, I can't be there anymore. So I went to LA, and it's crazy. And I say that story because um, it's literally like 5 seconds that changed my life forever. That's how long I glanced at the time or
Mhm.
the numbers. I probably should have glanced for more than 5 seconds, and maybe that was the problem. But I looked at it, and that one glance, that 5 seconds, changed my life forever. Because if I would have seen that number correctly, I would have went to a Canadian school, would have met my wife or whatever. Everything would have been in Canada. But instead of that, I messed up on that part, did well in the second, had to go to the States, went to LA, loved it, met my girlfriend, who is now my wife, in dental school, went to ortho at USC, did everything there, and then stayed in the States since then. So it's crazy how one decision, like one thing that you think is going to destroy you, I was like, man, this is like the worst thing in the world, ended up being like the absolute most amazing thing ever. So um, that's my journey to becoming like a dentist, and then from there it gets crazier. But we can kind of go into that as well a bit later.
Yeah. So were you living in Canada at the time or no? You were living.
So I was in, like, when I was applying for school, I was in Edmonton, Alberta. So it's like a city kind of like above Montana.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I mean, I guess, have you always envisioned yourself being in Canada, like working, practicing there?
Yeah, dude. So this is still like after I got into USC in LA. I was like, cool, I'm going to do my 4 years and like bounce back to Canada. Like, that's just me. I'm a Canadian boy. Like, that's it. And so I was in school, and then of course I was like, hey, this is kind of cool. Like LA is kind of nice. It's sunny. It's
Yeah.
weather's beautiful. Ladies are beautiful. Like, this is good. Life is good.
Yeah.
And then yeah, so it was probably after my second year, and that's when I met my girlfriend, and I was like, okay, like this is kind of getting serious. And then I had to kind of make the decision. It's tough, man. Like anybody, I'm sure there's people listening who have immigrated to different countries, and it's tough initially, and then but now like I can't envision myself anywhere different. Like for me, I can't go back to Canada. No, I can't, but I just don't see myself there.
Mhm.
And Dallas is an awesome city, man. Like we're super lucky. Economy is good. Weather is good, minus like a snowstorm every few years, or everything
And that's
goes
rare,
nuts.
man. That's
It's,
rare.
it's
Like that's
rare.
never.
It's rare. But there's
That's
always like one
crazy.
every like few years, and it's like, what the heck is going on? But no,
Yeah.
it's like an amazing city. It's crazy. It's so up and coming, and the growth is nuts. So like, it's very fortunate for us because we can open up multiple offices and grow it. And it's not like in the sense it's easy by any means, but it's probably easier than in some other spots. So yeah, we're super fortunate.
Yeah, because I hear like in Canada, the loans are higher, right? The
Hmm.
marketing is different over there too. Like it's not the same
Yeah,
as in the States and stuff like that. So
yeah,
you definitely got a lot going for you and a lot kind of not, you know what I mean? As far as
yeah,
like how you want to grow and things like that. But that's
yeah.
interesting.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah,
you
yeah,
went
yeah.
from LA to Dallas. How'd you get to
Yeah.
Dallas?
So like the LA market, I'm sure people are listening. LA is a tougher market.
Yeah.
My wife's dad is a dentist. So my wife's Korean and her dad's in K-Town in LA. And it's a super tough market. Like I'm sure you know, and some listeners know it's a tough market. And
Mhm.
so we were just like, okay, cool. Once I graduate, we need to think of something different. Like all of our friends were kind of moving around. And so we're trying to figure it out. And then we had some friends in Dallas, and we literally came out here for like 2 days. We're like, okay, this is a pretty cool city. Like there's tons of opportunity. Let's try it out. So we flew down a couple days, like cool, this is good. And then basically started talking to big companies, kind of corporate companies, and then started working down here. And then the first 6 months was really tough for my wife because she's born and raised in LA. And so, that transition is not easy. And Dallas has grown a ton. Dallas is yeah, it's like a big, no, obviously it's not like an LA, but it's a big city, right? So,
Yeah.
but then that's like 10 years ish ago. I mean, it was starting to develop, but it wasn't the same as it is now. So it was tough for her. This first 6 months was tough. And then now it's kind of like we have such a good group community here that like we're the same thing. Like we can't imagine ourselves going back to California now. So it's
How
just a
long
change. It's good though.
how long have you been in Dallas?
So we moved here in 2013. Yeah,
Oh,
2013.
okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So like
Yeah.
almost 10 years.
Almost 10 years. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Dude, from LA to Dallas, that's like from In and Out to Whataburger, man. It's a whole
That's
different.
right. That's a good comparison.
It's
Yeah.
dude, it's really, really different. But Dallas has grown a ton. I mean, like I know Frisco is saturated
That's
with
right.
like a ton of practices, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's actually good. So it's, people think like, oh, cool. Like I can just come out to Texas and open up and boom, like I'm good. But it's not. Yeah. There's spots like I'm actually in Frisco right now,
Oh,
tons of competition. So this is our kind of like my fourth office is here in Frisco, and it took a minute to get going. And then we opened up in Allen, and Allen's the same thing. It took a little bit to get going. So it's not just like cool, like you open up shop and like you're good. But yeah, so it's I mean it's probably better than some other markets, but it's definitely not by any means like one dentist for every 20,000 people or something like that.
yeah.
It's not like that. It's not like that at all.
Wait, Nathan, this is your fourth practice?
So I'm a part of 7 offices.
What? I thought
Yeah.
in my mind, I was thinking like, you're barely starting up right now. Like this is your first practice, dude. You're part
Yeah,
of
yeah.
7?
Yeah, we can talk about that a little bit too. So, because I have experience with working corporate,
Yeah.
working with friends, working with my wife. We're forming a DSO now, so we kind of have a little bit of everything. And I think there's goods and bads with everything, and there's no right way to do it. But
Mhm.
people talk about like corporate. They're like, oh man, like when people are coming out of school, like, oh, corporate, I don't want to be with corporate. But corporate was good for us because it allowed us to get that immediate income. You get pretty decent money right off the bat. It really, like, say for instance, okay, your listeners probably know of like Pacific Dental or Western Dental or like these
Mhm.
big people have like hundreds and hundreds of offices, and they have hundreds and hundreds of offices for a reason. Like they may not be exactly the model you want to do, but they have good systems and stuff in place that you can model. Like you don't have to necessarily I don't know, use like their total system, but there's a reason, and it helps you kind of realize like, oh, this is potentially a good way to do business or a way I don't want to do business, but at least you can pick up their systems and tweak as needed. So that's kind of what we did. We picked up, I was like, hey, this is cool. I like this and this and this. Like, this is maybe not how I want to treat my employees and dentists, but like I see the systems you guys are doing. I'm like, okay, cool. Like this makes sense. This is good. So I learned a ton for corporate. Like I mean, I recommend it just because I think it's good to get that experience. It's tough if you go straight, and this is just my personal experience with this, but I think it's tough to go straight into private practice because you're literally just learning that one way by that one dentist, or if you're taking over office or however it goes. Whereas I was kind of jumping around, so I can learn bits and pieces from everyone. I was like, okay, cool, this is good, and this isn't good. And for me, that was the way to go. But obviously, that's not the way for everybody. But yeah.
Yeah, man. What does that mean? You're part of 7 practice. So do you own, or like, how does that go?
Yep. So I'll do like a quick one. So we basically opened up. I partnered up with some friends at one office. So they had one that was already going. So I brought in ortho and took some equity in that. And then my wife and I opened up our own. Then I opened up with a friend, and then my wife and I opened up, and we opened up, and we opened up, and then I opened up with some friends, and then I opened up another one with the partners. So we have some that are just us, some that are with partners.
Yeah.
But now my wife doesn't really practice, but she practices a little bit. If she hears this, she'll want me to say that. she still sees patients.
Like, Nathan, what are you talking about?
If you're listening, yeah, you still see patients. Like maybe she sees them if as needed. We'll say that as needed. PRN. You know?
Yeah.
That's not her love. That's not her love. You know, some dentists come out, they're like, I love dentistry. Like, I can't wait to get that crown looking so pretty and good. That wasn't exactly her. I mean, you and your listeners know dentistry is stressful, man. That's really, really tough. So if you don't have that big passion for it, it gets tough and it's a serious thing. And we talked to our friends about this too. Like, you know, the mental health thing and stuff in dentistry is no joke. Like, you got to make sure you have a good support network, because especially if you're opening up your own, like there's days where I remember my friends did the same thing too. So maybe some of your listeners did this too. Well, I remember like literally staring at the wall, like being like 2 feet away from the wall, being like, what the heck? Like, I don't know what the heck I'm doing. Like, what is going on here? You know, every time you're starting a small business, you're just kind of freaking out. You're like, what am I doing? I've already school loans. Now I'm taking another like $500-600 to open this office. Like, I don't know what the heck I'm doing. Like, what is going on? So it gets a little tough, but yeah, I think having that support is like vital. Yeah.
What is the latest practice that you opened up?
So the latest one is in Saxe. So that's like a smaller community. I'd say just northeast of Dallas. So they're all basically in like the Dallas-Fort Worth area. But then this year we're going to open up one in San Antonio as well. So
Riverwalk,
starting to expand out. Yeah, that's right. I've only been there a couple times. Hopefully it goes well. That one I partnered with some friends too who have some other ones down there, so it should be good.
Yeah, San Antonio would be. That's pretty good. Okay, so then when did the latest one open up on, or day?
So how about this? The latest two, we did Allen in. Like literally when COVID happened, we opened an office. It was the worst. We did it.
That's what I was wondering.
I think we were trying to, we did one in like March, April-ish 2020. Basically, we're like, cool, we're good to go. And they're like, all right, all offices are shut down. We're like, awesome. We still have to pay rent. Like, awesome. We haven't even started. Yeah. So we did that one. And then the one in Saxe was like a little less than a year ago, probably like 9-10 months ago or something like that. So,
I was going to ask you, how hard was it to overcome out of that COVID where it's like shut down and you're like, were you thinking like, let's just kill it or nah?
I mean, yeah, it was tough. So like each office kind of presents its problems, but some of them, like our latest one in Saxe, like it opened, I was like, all right, like we're good. Like you can tell there's patients flowing. We have good dogs. I was like, okay, we're good. Allen, because we opened up during the pandemic and it's a kind of a tougher area. I was just like, holy smokes, this is a good example, and owners know this. For the first year and a bit, we took zero money from there. So we were just like, just kind of scraping by. Plus we had associates, so we had to make sure that the associates were paid. So it was tough. Like if I could have pulled the plug on it, like if it's easy to, I probably would have. But of course, like you've already spent 500K or whatever it is, you're not going to be walking away. But yeah, it was rough. Like only in the past maybe 6 to 8 months has it been like, okay, cool, like we're good, we're starting to produce, like things are good. But yeah, it was tough, man. That COVID thing was no joke for that office. Now,
Mhm.
COVID for the other offices, it was kind of crazy. I don't know if it was like this for the people but as soon as we came out of COVID, it was just like booming. Like I don't know
Yeah.
what happened, but it was just like, okay, everybody's waiting to come in, or I don't know what was going on, but yeah, it went kind of nuts. So I mean, we lucked out. So you kind of rely on other offices just in case Alan wasn't doing as good. So yeah, we got lucky.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. That's what I wanted to rewind a little bit and ask
Yeah,
you about the corporate, right? Like working for
yeah.
corporate.
Mhm.
What systems did you pick up where you're like, oh my gosh, these are the best? I never thought about that. I'm utilizing it until today. You're like, I utilized it. And what systems were you like, I hope nobody ever does this. This is the crappiest thing I've ever seen in my life, like system wise.
Okay, I'm sure like everybody knows this who's been in corporate. Like the one system or like one philosophy they do is it's like jam as many patients as you possibly can into the schedule. Like they'll figure it out. That is like
Yeah.
one
Figured out.
system where like, hey, we need to be more organized. That being said, like of course I started this off by saying like, hey, we were very busy today,
Yeah.
but we had enough assistants and like the flow is good and it's better. At corporate, I would see 50, 60, 70 patients and I'd have like two assistants, which is just bonkers. Like I'm just like, dude, I can't do this. I text the regional and I'll look at the schedule. I'm like, hey, if we're trying to be productive, like I can't be productive. Like there's so many patients. Like if somebody wants to start, they're gonna have to wait 2 or 3 hours. Like I'm not cool with that.
Yeah.
So loading up the schedule, not good. The one that we're still trying to implement, which I love, but it takes a ton of money and we're not there yet, but one day we will be there, is that so like for instance, for ortho, we try to systematize everything. If you have multiple, you have to. If you have one or two, not the end of the world. But once you get beyond that, you need to really systematize it. They
Mhm.
have this great program where it's like they will make you input things before you can advance, before you can do a treatment plan. So say for instance, I'd be like, okay, this patient is class 1, 10 millimeters crowding, yada, yada, yada. I'd go through that whole system before you can give them the treatment plan, which is amazing because it forces you to have all the information in there before you're presenting a treatment plan. Because the problem is, and we run into this sometimes too, is I mean, you're going all over the place and you give the patient a treatment plan, you do all these things, and then you forget to write your notes. And like a couple of days go by, and then you're kind of like, oh, what do we do? Or you have to run all these reports to try and figure out which notes were good. And you have to call the docs to make sure, hey, you forgot this note. And so it's a pain. So we can do reports and all that stuff, but I'm working on like this Excel sheet flow thing that will help me out. But like some of that stuff, I'm just like, oh, that's good. But their stuff is proprietary to them. It's not like
Mhm.
EagleSoft or like an Open Dental that you can modify. It's like their own system. But yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like some of the stuff they do like that is just is awesome. It's really good.
So what do you mean by like when you said not enough money yet to make that? What?
Well, that's a good thing. I don't fully know, but my thought process is if you want to make a I mean, I'm pretty sure if you want to make a program like that, it's basically you're making your own version of Open Dental. Because how it'd be like you'd open up their program. So it'd be like you'd open up Open Dental and you'd say, okay, click, we're doing an ortho consult, and then you go cool, and it'd go, okay, what classification are there? And you'd say, okay, class 1. Then go click, and it'd go to the next screen, into the next screen, next screen. But then it would enter all that information into Open Dental or whatever program you're using, and then it can generate a treatment plan and then go from there. So I don't know this, but actually maybe you know this, that I feel like that would be very expensive to basically have a programmer do that, but I could be totally wrong on that too.
Are you working on that? Are you working on making that happen or no?
I'm doing an Excel sheet that is very, very dumbed down to that. So, no, if one of your listeners has a good idea and wants to do that, then hey, maybe we can team up.
Yeah, team up. Get me in on that too. Like I got
I
$2,
mean, that,
so
that that's like a game changer, man. Because if you could
yeah.
do stuff like that, then I mean, it just systematizes everything. Like it could be amazing. It's just I only see it at the big corporates, so I'm like I'm just assuming it's like a fortune to do it.
Yeah, that's true. That is a good system though to have. Something like that,
Yeah,
right? In your
yeah,
practice. Any
yeah,
systems that you created, like you and your wife, or you and like a member, or you yourself created right now that you're like really proud of?
yeah. I mean, so the one that we just started and it's just kind of rolling out is, this is interesting. And the more bigger you get, the more, like I said, more systems you get. So we have, we have each position. So we have check in, check out, then we have like insurance, billing, dream plan, and those are kind of the main ones, and then assistants and all that stuff. But now we have, for each position, we have a set of videos explaining each position, showing how you do certain things in open dental. We have booklets and manuals, all that stuff for each position. So now when we hire somebody, they do the onboarding stuff where they do all the payroll stuff, and then they'll get a series of videos along with the manual so that they can get trained as quick as possible, and then they move on to the next one. Rather than, this is what happens in most offices, and you know this, I'm sure. They go, cool, Angela, you're hired. Here is Missy, and she's going to teach you how to check in. It's like, it's a terrible system. Like, it's a horrible, and that's what you can do when you have one office, because the owner's there, so he's like, hey, don't do this. But once you get more, it's too tough. Plus, they're going to do all these things that you may not agree with, and you don't have the checklist. And so getting that organized, honestly, it's been like a 6-month process, but now we've just kind of wrapped it up. Because you need like so many videos, and it needs to be good, or else it's just lame. It's not good. So, so if it's not entertaining, it's just lame. So it's like, if it's not done well, then it's like, why even do it at all? So that's one thing we just got finished. I'm like, hey, this is cool. Like this makes onboarding good, because you guys know, like listeners know, that right now is a crazy time with labor. People are coming in and out, and like, you need to pay people more, and it's just nuts. So if you don't have a good, efficient way to onboard, especially if you're trying to grow, it's tough.
How are you doing that then, man? Like, how are you finding people right now? And like, how, like, there's been people, even me, like, I'm like, I was there for the interview, but you didn't show up. You know what I mean? Like, how does that even work with you?
Right?
Yeah.
So it's like, I just today, we're supposed to have 2 assistants coming for an interview, both no call, no show. It's just like, I'm like, why are you doing all this stuff too? So the best thing is, this is our philosophy, is obviously you have to pay people correct, right? You can't, I mean, that's just the way. If somebody's making $18 an hour somewhere else, like, you have to at least do that or more, and you have to offer benefits, and you have to entice them. So whatever, that's like step number 1. Also, if you're treating people really well, they're going to refer their family, friends, and everybody. Not necessarily, I think that's always the best, but man, like, we have so many family and friends that have joined us from, like, people who are already staff, which I'd say 80 or 90% of the time ends up being awesome. So that's how we recruit a lot. And then, then it's just like the usual, like the dental posts and the Indeeds, and just like giving Indeed all your money, and hoping that you get a couple of good applications.
And
it's just a numbers. Like, we have people who that's like pretty much all they're doing. It's just like going through applications and trying to hire, because man, it's no joke now. It's crazy. It's tough.
So with 7 practices, do you have like, I guess, like a hub? Like, I've known some I guess, practice owners, or CFO, CEOs and stuff like that. They're like, yes, one practice is a hub. That's the call center, blah, blah, blah. Is it like that with you, or no? It's like everything's separate.
So we are in the process, like, we're in a big transition where right now everything is pretty much separate. Like, if one office is closed, sure, things will get funneled to a different office. But right now everything's pretty much separate. But within the next, definitely probably within the year, we'll get a central billing for sure. I think for us, that'll be the first step. And then soon after that, a call center. We have friends that have gone, like pretty close friends that have now 50, 60, 70 offices. And they're telling us it's kind of like around the 10 office mark where they really had to make that switch. But I mean, once again, that's their personal opinion. Like, everybody can be different. Some people want to do it less, some people want to do it more. But for right now, it's okay. But at a few of the offices, like one or two of the offices, it's just too crazy up front now. Like, there's just, if you're doing billing, if you're doing insurance, if you're calling on patients, like, there's just physically not enough space unless you have like a 5,000 square foot office. But most of ours are like around 3,000. So we're getting close to that point. We don't have that yet, but definitely close.
Is that your goal, Nathan? Like 50, 60, 70?
Oh yeah.
Are you serious?
150, 200, 300.
Dude, like, you're real.
Wait, we'll watch this again 10 years from now. This could be total BS, or it could be good.
It's like, well, we're back at
I'm
one.
putting it out to the yeah. We had to trim down. Things
Yeah,
went a little crazy.
dude,
But
man,
that's
no,
the goal. I want to put it out to
imagine
the ether. Yeah.
it's for real 150. Watch, we're gonna watch this back like in a couple years. We're
Okay.
gonna be like, remember when you only had 8 or 7? Now you're at 150. Man, let me
That's
ask
the
you
goal.
something really quick, Nathan. I've seen this a lot. What are the struggles from going from one practice to 2 practices? Where did you feel where you're like, dude, this was the struggle? Like opening it
Yeah.
up is a struggle, right? But then transitioning,
Right.
because I feel like some people think like, oh, if I got one down, I can get another one, I can get another one. But is it like that?
No. Yeah, I mean that's good. There's like a couple of things with that. So number one, and I mean I see this in my friends too, is, and I'm sure you've heard this, like the golden handcuffs kind of thing, where you feel like dentists feel because they make a good income. Like why do anything else? You're making a decent income, right? So
Yeah.
the problem is you feel like, hey, if I pull away from this, I need to pay somebody to do that same thing, right? And so you have this, hey, I'm making X amount of 100K, 200, through whatever you're making, and you feel like, hey man, like I don't have enough income going into this office to pull that away. And that's just like this limiting belief. This is, I'll go through this quickly, which is something I believe in. This guy named Ian Pruckner gave this to us like a couple weeks ago. I was at
Uh-huh.
this meeting with a couple of people, and he gave us this like little acronym which I really like. It's called TBAR. So everything is mindset. I think like everything is mindset. Like the only reason you're successful or not successful is mindset. So TBAR is your thoughts influence your beliefs, which change your actions, which deliver different results. So it's TBAR. So people, they're probably coming to you. They're like, hey man, I want more patients. Like, just give me more patients, blah, 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 blah. And they're just looking for this specific result. But the problem is there's always going to be issues, right? So same thing if you're working out, like, hey, I want a 6-pack abs or whatever you want.
Yeah.
You want this one result, right? But if your thoughts don't change around your mentality, then you're screwed because there's always going to be hardships. So if you don't think, hey, I'm a healthy person, I'm going to work out every day, I'm super healthy, yada, yada, you're screwed. So what you should do is you should say, hey, I'm a healthy person, I'm going to go to the gym, I'm going to do all these things. And that's going to affect what you truly believe in yourself. You truly think like, hey, I am this healthy person, which will then change your actions. Because like, hey, I have to do this because I'm a healthy person. I'm going to eat right, blah, 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 which then leads to the results. And it's this kind of interesting distinction. So for me, it's the same thing where I think, hey, like I just put it out there into the
Yeah.
podcasting world. Like, hey, we're going to do 150 offices. I truly believe that we're going to do a ton of offices. Like that is my belief. And my wife and I, we kind of keep talking about that is our beliefs. And so the actions we're doing are supporting that, and the results will follow. But that's like going back to going from 1 to 2 is if you don't have those thoughts like, hey, I can do this, and this belief you're going to do it, you're screwed. Because what's going to happen is, and I'm sure anybody who's brought on an associate goes, hey, I was making 200 or 300, whatever it was this year. I brought an associate. Holy smokes, I'm making 100 now. Like what happened?
Yeah.
Because they're taking that income. And if you don't switch your mentality and say, hey, this is an investment for this next office, because I know eventually this office is going to do well and I can put another associate in there and pull out. If you don't have that belief or those thought and that thinking, you're kind of screwed. So for me, it was always like, this is my thoughts, this is what I'm going to do. But for some people, they're like kind of trying to dabble and they get screwed. And I've seen it, but they try to open up a second one and they're kind of trying to bounce back and forth. And now they have double the overhead and they don't have enough people. And it's just, it's a mess. So yeah, I think getting around that belief system to me was like the most important thing to do.
The mindset,
The mindset.
yeah. Don't they say like
The
it's
mindset.
harder to imagine a future we want than to remember the past we lived through? So we kind of always try and think like,
Mm,
man, we have to put ourselves like, what does my future self want? Instead of like,
yes.
what do I want right now? I want a
Yes.
burger, right? But like, if I want the 6-pack abs, like
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
like that. So I
Yeah.
get you, man. I get you.
Yeah.
Mindset is huge. So that's the main
And
thing you think we need to change.
I mean, it's interesting too. Like they're talking about this as well. It's like, a lot of people, I mean, it's fine. They can just say, hey, I'm cool with my situation. I'm happy. Everything's all good. But I mean, I kind of surround myself with people who are like, striving to do better, whether it's friends who are in dental, who were in dental school with me, who are dentists now, or orthodontists, or it's just like other people. I really like hanging out with people who are like not in dentistry, they're
Yeah.
crushing it in some other aspect because I'll tell them something, oh, we crushed it today. And they're like, you think that's good? You're like, no, they're kind of clown on you. And it's good because you realize like, hey, there's these other levels that we can go. Like what scares me the most, and this is probably why I want so many offices. What scares me the most is like 10 years from now, still having the same amount of offices. Like that to me is like terrifying. If I don't grow, I'm gonna be like, what the hell, Nathan? What is wrong? What a
What was
waste.
I doing?
Yeah, what was I doing?
Man.
But yeah, so I think for me, like mentality and surrounding yourself, what they always say, they say that you are the sum of your 5 closest friends, you know. So if all your friends are just chilling, doing one and just kind of coasting by, then likely that's what you're going to do. So I try to be specific with kind of like who I'm spending a lot of time with.
Yeah. Why, Nathan? I guess why 10 years from now would you look and be like, I only have 10 offices? Like, what the heck? You know what I mean? When people are like listening and they're like, it's been 10 years, I haven't even broken even yet. Like in my first office, like what is happening? So why?
That's good. So there's a couple, and I think you have to have a good why in order. I think that's like Simon Sinek, right? He's like, start with why. Like your why has to be like a big driving force for you. So we have, and this is going to sound like not self-serving, but kind of like, yeah, right, he's doing this. But we've recently started donating a lot to charity because that's like a big thing for us. We're doing Compassion International, which is like this great organization that is giving basically money to people in different countries who can't afford it. So the idea is, hey, as we grow, like we're going to sponsor probably, hopefully around 100 people this year, 100 kids. And that's an ongoing thing for life. Like if we don't do better and better, we cannot keep doing this. Like we can't afford it. Like number one, we can't afford it. So we're trying to do these things so that we can sponsor more and more kids. Like if you were to talk to my wife, her dreams are that even bigger. She's like, I want to sponsor like 1 million kids. You know, she wants to do something crazy. So part of it is that, right? And that's like the selfless thing. But I mean, obviously, let's be honest, we're in business to make money and to kind of grow and to have these kind of, these big dreams. And for me, I've always been somebody who's like, hey, I want to dream big. Like when I was in like junior high and high school, so I played basketball. My dream is like, I'm going to go to the NBA. Like, I'm going to crush it. Like, I was like, I'm going to be like Michael Jordan. Then I'm like, oh yeah, I'm a 5'10" white dude from Canada. That might not be the best. Might not be the best dream. But I always have like these big goals. For me in a day, like today is a great day. It's super productive. I get to talk to you. We get to like discuss these things. It's awesome. Like that's what I love to do. If I was just like chilling at home watching like Desperate Housewives or something, like I'd be like, oh, this is a terrible, it just isn't fulfilling. But that's not for everybody. Like I have friends that are, you know, like that too. They have their few offices and those like, dude, I'm done. And they want to retire in a few years. They want to be done with dentistry and like at 45, have like enough savings or enough investments so that they can live comfortably, and that's it. Like they don't want to do anything else. And that's cool. Like that's them. That's great. But for me, like that is like literally torture. Like I cannot do that. So, and that's just me personally.
Yeah, no, I get you. Especially when people talk about like retirement, I'm like, I'm retired right now. If you think about it, like I want to do what I want, and then until that's it, you know, kind of thing. But that's interesting, man. Let me ask you something, because what is like, if we can dive into your businesses, like what is production collection looking like for your businesses? How many new patients are you getting? Because I think in order for people to start I want to start thinking like, okay, I just opened up. I'm getting 10 new patients at best a month right now. Production, I wish I can have enough to open a second practice, you know, like where do we go from there? Like what happens there?
So, I mean, I can give you, like, I'm open about numbers and stuff. So like it depends, obviously each office is so different, but you know, we have a couple offices that are doing a couple million. Then we have a couple offices doing in between 1 and 2. And then our newer offices are doing between 600 to, some of them haven't been open a year. So like 600, 700, 800 or something. So, but keep in mind, people are like, you know, if it's their first office and they're just a general dentist, it's going to be so much different because I'm ortho. We either have my wife or some partner, an associate in there doing general. So if you're just doing general, it's going to be way harder to make bigger numbers. Like it's just tough. Like I do a couple cases and can produce, you know, 10, 20, 30K, whereas like no newbie GP is going to be producing that in a day. Like it's just tough. Like they're trying to produce that a month, you know, or something.
Yeah.
So the numbers are way different. And then our collections are pretty close to those numbers. So it doesn't come that far off. That being said, in a newer office, because ortho is so strong, our collections will be quite a bit under production for the first year and a half-ish, because we do a lot of payment plans. So after the next, like once it's 2 years in, collections and productions are pretty close. But as far as new patients, like also we've just been lucky. Like number one, I think Texas is a great spot. Not too many dentists move to Texas.
Yeah.
Texas.
Everybody right now, go look at the demographics.
Okay, Dallas, Texas, I'm moving tomorrow.
Frisco.
Yeah. Hey, you can work with that, so we're good. So yeah, we've been lucky with new patients. So on average, a newer office, it probably has seen 60 new patients. The older offices are seeing in between 110 to 140. So like the new patient numbers are pretty decent. Obviously, that's how we get it. But we do everything. Like people are just like, oh, cool. Like I just want to open my office and like I'm just gonna put up a website and do like, I don't know, spend a couple $100 on Google. Where it's like, nah, man, that doesn't fly. Because as you know, that's like if you're only spending like the limited amounts on whatever marketing you're doing, it comes that belief thing again. Like you're just like, oh, I'm going to put money out there, and you don't get any return immediately. You're like, oh, this isn't working. Like, marketing doesn't work. That's like the number one thing. I'm just like, man, you guys are ridiculous. Like, why does McDonald's have a billboard every 10 feet? Like, why is there Starbucks everywhere? Like, there's a reason that these billboards and these magazines and the whatever. I mean, marketing works. Like, it works. You might not be able to. Like, this is the one hard thing with people who are like online is they go, oh, cool. Like, I want to give you or Facebook or whoever like $200, and I want to see like X amount of patients come in. And it's like, dude, you can't always 100% track it, right? Like I can give Google or Yelp or whoever some money, and that patient may see our ads and be like, oh, that's cool. But then they may go to Google, and then they may chill out for 2 weeks, and then they may like randomly see us somewhere else and then call in. And we have no idea now that that's coming from Facebook, but that actually was from Facebook. You know what I mean? So a lot of times people just like spend money, they don't get the result, and they go back. But for us, we know like our belief is, hey, like marketing works. Like we're going to do everything. Of course, we're going to check like, click-through rates and all those different metrics. But yeah, if we're not like, oh, we got this patient directly from Facebook or Google or whatever, we don't get enough, like we stop. It's like, nah, man, like we almost like double down. We're like, okay, let's go. Let's go.
Man.
Yeah.
What have you seen with marketing? I guess like, could you give us like your plan? Like, what are you doing or what have you done where it's like amazing ROI? And then you're like, this sucks. We're not doing this again.
Yeah. So one thing we have not done, which we're kind of thinking of, is like postcards and mailers. Like I've only heard bad things. That's just me personally. I know people have done that, haven't had great results. One, this will be surprising probably to most of your listeners. I don't know if you guys do this, but Pinterest is a big one. Like Pinterest. So yeah, very. So Pinterest. You and I probably are not super familiar with it because it caters to, I believe it's like the 25 to 55-year-old females to an average household income is like around 100K. So I'm just like, oh, like ding, ding, ding. Like this is like exactly who we want, right? And so my wife is more into that stuff. So she does all these posts, and then we market on Pinterest. And Pinterest is also a search engine. So you basically go in there and you type like dentist, and like all these cool like DIY dentist stuff comes up, but then like also these nice offices show up. And if you're like Googling or Pinteresting in it, I don't even know what you'd call that. More, you keep seeing like our offices. You're like, oh, cool. Like they live by us, or their offices are by us, and they come in, or they'll directly from Pinterest click on a pin. Like I'm not an expert on this Pinterest, so they'll click on a pin, I believe, which will lead us to a landing page, and then they'll fill out a form and come in. So Pinterest is one of them that the ROI is like is great. And then all the other ones are like Google and Facebook, all that stuff works. Instagram works. We haven't marketed on TikTok, but we're on TikTok. TikTok's one of those things where it's crazy. You can do something and go viral. We had a friend who posted like a braces thing, and he has like 20 million views, and we posted this thing like braces color. It has like 1.5 million views. I'm like, this is insane. YouTube's one of those too, where you post it. I had this one where is me going through this orthodontic adjustment. I'm like, hey, this is braces, and these are the colors, and yada yada. like 1 million views. I was like, what the hell? Like, I
Yeah.
don't get it. Like, I don't
Yeah.
get it. And then some you put all this time into, like, oh, this is professional. This looks amazing. Like 2 views. You're like, oh my gosh.
And it's you refreshing. You're like, refresh.
Yeah, yeah. Like those views are you. Stop refreshing.
Oh man, that's interesting. Dude, Pinterest though.
Yeah, so
I
that's
never.
something that people look into.
So what do we do? Like what do we take pictures of our office, of our teeth, patients? What?
Yeah. So I think like, and once again, my wife is doing a lot of this stuff, but she will take beautiful pictures of the office or take pictures of like, hey, we're doing free whitening or we're doing offers on Zoom and like make it look pretty into a pin. So it's like just different dimensions, but you can repurpose all your Facebook stuff. If you have nice Facebook, like either pictures or videos, you can repurpose that and pin it. But like, I think the people that do really well on Pinterest are very active. They're pinning like all the time, like multiple times a day. So it's just like you just want stuff that's super aesthetic, and my wife is better than that than me. I'm good at like executing stuff. She's very much the artistic one. Yeah, so if you do something that's pretty, it can kind of semi go viral. And the beauty of, I'd say, Pinterest and YouTube is that it's like forever ever, you know what I mean? Like I have videos that we did on YouTube from like 2 years ago that suck, I think, and they're still getting like thousands of views a week, you know. It's just like it costs you basically nothing to make that. And what people are seeing that, and then somebody's gonna see, like, we have tons of people who are like, oh, I saw you on YouTube. I'm like, oh, okay, like I guess this, like, you thought it was good enough to come in, you know.
Yeah.
So like it's the random other stuff that I think is neat, and it's different because everybody's doing Google, everybody's doing Facebook, and I think those things are amazing. But it's like, hey, let's do these other things that are slightly different that maybe not as many people are doing, and it just kind of like sets you apart just a little bit.
Yeah. That's good, man. I
Yeah,
like that. I like that
yeah,
Pinterest. And it's the
yeah,
perfect
yeah.
like demographic that like we are all
Perfect.
kind of looking for. You know what I mean?
It's perfect. It's so perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. What
Yeah.
really quick, what's the name of your practice?
So the one that we mainly work at is Thrive Dental and Orthodontics.
They're not all the same name?
So the last four are, so it took us a while to figure out what the heck we were doing. You know? So we went to some conferences and they're
Yeah.
like, oh, each office should be like a little family office, and it should be dedicated to that position. So our first office was Breckenridge because it's in this Breckenridge Park. So I go, Breckenridge Dental and Orthodontics, and we're like, cool. And the next one is Oak Brook because like there's some oaks and brooks and blah blah blah. And then, I mean, personally, I think this is my personal opinion. I could be wrong. I think it's a terrible idea because if you're going to do multiple, if you're going to do one, cool, name it whatever, because it probably doesn't even matter in the end.
Yeah.
But it's better if you're doing multiple to have the same, in my opinion. And people have done it differently. I know people with 50, 60 offices. Pretty much every office is different. But from a marketing standpoint, like it's so much easier, and like it's a brand recognition. You know, like if we put out some stuff that has Thrive, we can put it out in Frisco, but that doesn't, like, it can still market for our other offices, and then you don't have to like rebrand everything, and everything in bulk is so much easier. It's just way better. So once we switched, I was like, okay, like everything's going to be like this because it's better. Branding is vital. Like branding is so important if you're going to do multiple. Even if you're doing one, I think branding is important. But I think, you know, it just gets more and more important the more and more you do, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Thrive. So all of them are going to be Thrive now.
Yeah.
Tight.
Yeah. Who knows? Maybe a couple of years we'll switch it up. Because I know like Pacific Dental will be a good one. But Pacific Dental out west of what you guys is all Pacific Dental and all that stuff. Here it's mainly called Modern Dental. Like they've switched it up, like Modern Dental or something. And then Western Dental, which has like hundreds of offices out in California, here they're either called like Smile Best, or they're different brands. But as far as like, I mean, I just think branding is so important. Like if you have a good brand and you open up the next office and they're like, oh, cool, like we already know that brand. Like it's so much easier, I think.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. It's easier on the wallet too. What?
Yeah.
Throughout this process, Nathan, from the moment I guess you signed the first lease till right now, today, what can you recollect where it's been like, man, that was my biggest struggle, my biggest fail, pitfall? What would you say is some of them?
We're like, I feel like the only reason we succeeded was because we were just like so naive, and we're like, we are going to work as hard as we can to figure it out. Because we made, so here's something. Okay, so we have like our first week that we opened, we had this specialist who's coming in who's going to help us, a periodontist, and he's like, Okay, like, yeah, my fee schedule is slightly different, so we're gonna have to enter into open dental because we use open dental. So we're gonna have to use, we have to enter into open dental because it's slightly different. Yeah, that's your patients won't understand the fee schedules. And we're like a weekend, right?
Uh-huh.
And I was like, what's a fee schedule? He's like, the and I was just like, oh yeah, we just like kind of go by office fees, but we're in network with all these insurances. So we were like, if you read, people know, we were supposed to go in and enter each fee schedule into the computer. So when a patient comes up with insurance, you give them the correct fees. And so like it was just a mess. Not like that was number one. Number two, we were sending claims electronically without a clearinghouse. So typically you'd send it to somewhere and the clearinghouse would then send it to the insurances.
Uh-huh.
So none of our stuff was going to the insurance companies. It was just like, I mean, there's and so many. We had this one girl who we thought she knew what she was doing, our very first like quote unquote manager. And she literally turned to our other assistant and she's like, I don't know what I'm doing. like, yeah, like in front of a patient. And I was just like, this is bad. And so we're like, okay, we need to find somebody. And then she was like brought on her friend and was like, dude, this girl doesn't know what she's doing. So we let her go. And so her friend's like, oh, that's my friend. So she left too. And I was like, oh my God. Like it
Oh
was just so like,
man.
there's so many things. And I'd say like the one, yeah, it was nuts. Like there's so many things. I was like, man, how did we make it? Like that's why I say I stare at the wall. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, what is the claim? Like, what is insurance? Like, should we be opening this office? Like, this isn't making sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a lot of that. So if your listeners are in the first like 4th or like 1 to 6 months of opening, like there is hope. You don't know what you're doing right now, but there is hope, and it can be awesome because now I literally will go into offices. Like I work like 2 or 3 days a week with patients.
Mhm.
But then on my off days, I'll kind of come in and I'm like, I'll run reports to make sure things are running. And I'll ask them like, hey, like, everything's good? And everybody's like, yeah, everything's cool. I'm just like, all right. Like, there's it's nothing to do now because the systems are running properly, but like, it takes so long to get to that point. So, but yeah, we made a lot of mistakes, a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Like to build the systems around those mistakes. I mean, like, so I guess you got to have those mistakes, right? In order to make these systems
Yeah.
happen. And
Yeah.
I don't know, man. Sometimes like you really got to fight to not to micromanage either. You know what I mean? Like you're like, oh, you're not
Mm,
doing that right. And
yeah.
kind of let it
I,
happen.
I think like luckily I was part of my wife too, which is good and bad. Tough to work with your significant
Yeah.
other. But then I also had this. So our very first hire ever is now our regional manager. So she's been with us since day one. And
Mhm.
luckily we had a good enough relationship where she could be like, hey, like Dr. Nate, your stuff like this isn't making sense and you need to chill out. Like you're too much right now. Because
Yeah.
I'm intense. I'm like, hey, I want to like I'm just like, I have lots of energy. I'm like, let me look. And she's like, you're actually hurting. They're hurting the practice and the flow and how you're doing it. And it hurts your ego because you're just like, dude, I know what I'm doing. But then you have to take a step back and be like, okay, ego, chill out. Like, oh, maybe I should take a step back because people don't want to be micromanaged. And
Yeah.
when you're able to take a step back, like that is when things like awesome things happen because people feel empowered and they start, treating patients better and they're happier and they bring on their friends and they bring on their family. Like it's just such a beautiful thing. When you micromanage, it is just like, man, it's rough. It's not good.
Yeah. Yeah. That does hurt whenever your
Yeah.
team member tells you like, hey, dude, it's falling apart because of you. You're like, I made it.
Yeah,
What are you
right.
talking about?
Exactly.
But then you look back and
Exactly.
you're like, oh, it is falling. That means you're humble, man. That's good. You're a humble guy, man.
I
That's
try. I
good.
try. My wife keeps me humble, and some of our staff members they keep me humble. Like you're not that smart. I'm like,
Yeah. Like I thought of the brand
like we're
logo,
doing we're doing pretty good, aren't we? Like yeah, whatever. I'm like okay.
I know. Hey, that leads me to one of my last questions. I wanted to ask you about
Yeah,
this, like, because
yeah,
you are working with your spouse. How
yeah.
has this like affected your personal life?
That's a good question. So I know like a lot of our friends have significant others or that are in the dental field too. So they work with them. And with us, it was hard, man. Like it was really hard. I would say I don't recommend this is me personally once again. I don't recommend it if you're in the same space doing the same thing. It's too tough. Like if I was a general dentist and she's a general dentist, it's too hard because I would be like, okay, let's do this and this. And she would say something different. And it's tough. Like this is a good thing having a good regional manager too. Well, at that point, she was just an assistant, but she was good enough to tell us like, hey, Like, it's not cool when you guys are coming in kind of bickering about the business or about anything else. They're like, it creates a weird vibe, you know? So that would happen
Mm.
when we get in there. It's like, oh, we had something happen at home. So you kind of bring it in, like you can't separate that. And you're the owner, so nobody can really tell you like to stop it. And so it was that, like that part was really tough. Contrary to that, now that we have very different roles, like she's very much the artistic, she makes all of our stuff beautiful. She made our website. She has all these other talents that is amazing. And like she's good at taking pictures. So that made it, we're in a totally different roles. So now we can like, we synergistically lift each other up.
Mm-hmm.
So initially it was tough to find that balance to be like, hey, like we can't both be the alpha in here, like this isn't going to work. And so it's more like, okay, cool. After a while, and after we were successful enough, we could say, okay, like I'm going to be the systems person kind of driving the company. You're going to be the artistic, like we call her the heart of the
Yeah.
practice. So she goes in there, she's like super loving. So she'll talk to the patients or staff and just make sure everybody feels like appreciated. And because that's one thing as you grow, like, man, it becomes too like quote unquote corporate where it's like ice cold. So she makes sure like that's a big thing of ours. Like when we're growing, we're not going to be this like, it's like heartless corporate. Like we're going to be, that's why we want to make sure we're giving to Compassion International. That's why we want to make sure we're promoting from within. That's why we have like my wife to make sure she's going around to all the offices to make sure people feel like loved and heard. And that's like a big thing. We use like love all the time in our offices. Like we're
Yeah.
just like, we love you. And like for us, it's weird coming from a guy, but my God, screw it. Like I think it's
Yeah.
good because it promotes like, you're like, hey, like we deal with a lot of females. And so you just have to kind of like come down to the level. You cannot be creepy about it.
I love you. You know,
Yeah,
it's
there's
like,
like,
what?
man, this is weird. But yeah, like comes from the heart, just like, hey, like I love you. Like this is a great like situation. Like I love working with you. Like this is awesome. So
Yeah,
hopefully we can keep that up. That's our goal.
dude. That man, I love that. Like, we don't say I love you enough, just in general in life. Like all
Yeah.
of us, we don't, you know what I mean? And we all when we
Mhm.
can, you know what I mean? So that's really
Yeah.
awesome to have like a heart and the
Yeah.
brain, you know what I mean? In
Yeah. Yeah.
a
Exactly. Exactly.
operation. Is it,
Yeah.
do you guys ever kind of like get home and you're like, hey, let's not talk about work or anything like that? Or how does that
Yeah.
work?
Yeah. So for us, we had, especially when we were working together, we had a cutoff time. Like now it's not as bad because we don't see each other as much at work. So when we get home, we're like, hey, we need to discuss some things. But especially when we're at work and then talked about at work at home. So it's like 7:30-ish. We were just like, hey, cut off. Like it's no more. Like no more work. Let's just talk about whatever. Let's watch Netflix. Let's do whatever we gotta do. We just like literally cut it off. And like I was very specific and intentional about that because you need to get away from work. Like work's cool, you know, it's good, it's fulfilling, it creates an income for you, it's awesome. But if you can't ever cut off from it, it's tough. And that's one problem when you're working with your spouse because it can literally be all day and night, you know,
Yeah.
work. And so if you're not intentional about being like, hey, like this is the cutoff time, it can get like, yeah, man, it affects everything. Like it's not like sexy for your relationship to be talking about
Yeah.
work all the time. It's like you need to be intimate. You need to like feel that closeness. So if you don't turn it off, it doesn't work.
Yeah, that's true, man. And I like the
Yeah.
fact that y'all had a, I guess, office manager or assistant at the time who
Yep.
was able to tell you like, dude, it is so awkward when like two people are fighting and they come in and then you're just like, um, should we just go
Yeah.
home? I don't know. Like, you know what I mean? You're like, what do I do? Whose side do I go on?
Yeah.
I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, it's
Yeah.
so
Yeah. Yeah.
awkward, man. It's
Yeah.
good for anybody listening, like if they're in that position, like to let their like employees know, like if you feel weird, like let me know. Right.
Yeah. It's important. Like I really do think that helps us so much. Like you having friends that can tell you that is important. Guys will mainly be like, dude, you're acting like an idiot. but
Yeah.
like having friends is good. But like, yeah, somebody in the office who you can like be real with, like who isn't afraid to tell you like, hey, you're being an idiot, like stop, like this is not cool. Or you're being super insensitive there. You know, I understand you're stressed, but you're being insensitive. Because if you don't have that, you lose that connection with the rest of the staff. And sometimes as guys, we're so like alpha-ish. We're like, oh, like we just power through it. And it hurts the relationship with everybody. And like, what's the point of all this? Like, we're in this because we want to have these amazing relationships, like with everybody. That's like why I love our staff. And that's another reason we do this, because I want to be out there, like, I want my staff to crush it, like in life and with our offices. I want to pay them as much as I possibly can. And that is like an honest to goodness goal, and that's been with us forever because these people are freaking amazing. Like
Mhm.
if we could make like billions of dollars so we can pay everybody $1 million, that'd be amazing. Like that's what I want to do. Maybe
Yeah.
that's not realistic yet, but I want I want to pay them so much because they're so awesome. Like they're such good people.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah, that's good. How big is your staff? How big is your team? All of everybody.
So we probably have like 50 or 60-ish people, somewhere around there.
Dang, $60 million right there. If you were to pay them all $1 million.
Oh, that's some lofty goals now. Okay.
Yeah.
2020, let's go.
2020.
Or 2022, I'm sorry.
I know.
2022.
It's
Let's
60
go.
million just to pay our staff,
Yeah.
and then everything else. You know what I mean?
Yeah, zero profit, but we crushed it.
But nobody's quitting. So I know. I will work for you, man. I'd be like, give me, hey, for real though, give me a practice, man. If you're gonna have 150, like give me like a percentage of one of those. Like, I'll help out. That's nice, Nathan, man. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much, man. You're a blast. If our listeners want to reach out to you, pick your brain, do anything like that, where can they find you?
So probably the best spot is on social, on Insta. It's probably the best, Thrive Dentistry. That's the one I'm looking at the most, respond to the most. Everything's already there. So yeah, we listen to that a lot.
Awesome. So guys, if you want to go in the show notes below or in the description below, reach out to Nathan, pick his brain a little bit more, see how you can contribute to his 170 practices that he will be opening by next year. Watch, we're laughing now and we're like, man, look, you're at 300 practices, and we were thinking like it was impossible, but now you're at 300 like 2 years from now. Watch, it's gonna happen.
Gotta think bigger.
You gotta think bigger. 300 is so small. What are we talking about? No, but man, Nathan, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being with us. It was a pleasure, and we'll hear from you soon.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.